Hi everyone, and welcome to our Google Plus Hangout with the CX experts. Today we are joined by some wonderful CX experts. I don't know if you have been familiar, if this is your first Google Plus Hangout, but we do have a great panel here for you today to answer your questions. Our topic for our Hangout today is experience design, improvement, and innovation. And you can feel free to join by asking questions on the comments section of this Google Plus Hangout. Or if you're viewing this on YouTube or feel more comfortable, you can ask your questions on Twitter using hashtag CXHangout. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to send those to us here as we go live on the comments box under this Google Plus Hangout or on Twitter using hashtag CXHangout. Our topic for today is experience design, improvement, and innovation. And right now we have 3 of our CX experts. Our expert panel provides a really wonderful resource for CXPA members. You can always ask them questions through email. Just visit cxpa.org, and you can do that at any time. I'd like to introduce today's experts. We have with us today Yvonne Nomizu, Lynn Hunsaker, and looking very gray today is Jim Rembach, but I can promise you that he is feeling much better than he looks.
Appreciate that.
So we're going to go ahead and get kicked off here. And as we wait for your questions to come in, we've got a question here ready to go. So I want to ask all of you, and I'll leave it to the 3 of you to decide who wants to take the first stab at this one. But our first question is, what does it take to make significant improvement in customer experience? Lynn, you want to start?
Sure, yes. Well, significant improvement requires really all hands on deck. And we've done some studies where we've correlated where do you get the biggest bang for your buck in customer experience. And the companies that were showing their voice of the customer results to all employees were seeing better return on their investment in customer experience and better business results. Also, if they were expecting action on voice of the customer by the owners of the key drivers. What I found in my own experience managing customer experience for many years is that if you conduct workshops where you're really studying what customers are saying in their comments and dig down into the root causes and create action plans in each business unit addressing what they own as the customer experience, now you have a collective effort that is really more inclined to move the needle for customer experience toward significant improvement rather than a little bit here and a little bit there or relying on a certain technology to do it all. So all hands on deck is my short answer for that question.
Jim, or Yvonne?
I would add to that. I think the idea of, I guess, 3 things. One is to pick an area that's got a good return on investment, as Lynn was saying, bang for your buck. And I think the discipline for the best CX professionals is to think about it from, did you hit the mark in terms of what really drives customer value? And of course, that's all the voice of the customer research and very, very good listening. And the other thing is what hits business value. Because, you know, breakthrough in the eyes of the C-suite is something that really does affect the bottom line of the business as well. The other thing I would say is just the word innovation, which is there's so many ways to look at a process or look at a customer experience and do incremental change. Here's a bad touch point, let's make that touch point better. Here's where we take too long, here's where we don't communicate enough. And sometimes it's sort of one-off types of things. But the innovation, and why I'm excited about this particular hangout, is I think the breakthroughs come from very future-oriented thinking, a little bit clean slate. If you had no process today and you were just starting and you had significant competitors, you know, how would you approach it? So some of those tough sort of blue sky questions, I think, can lead to those kinds of breakthroughs.
Let's take another question here. This one is, can some of you share some examples of how design principles can be used for more than just product design? Anyone want to take a first stab?
Well,
I think
when
it's
you're
completely applicable. Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think there's any question these days that design thinking and design methods can apply to services really well. IDEO and other companies are putting together, cross-functional teams, and cross-functional is starting to mean something very broad these days. It's a put people with absolutely no knowledge, but they have a cognitive perspective to a problem. They might be a psychologist by background. They might be an anthropologist. They might be economists, and you kind of put those styles into a room and really look at what outcome you're trying to achieve, and then use some of the design techniques to lay out lots of new ideas. I think that's part one, and part two is just that ability to do iterative design, start with a concept, test, prototype, test, pilot, test, and so on.
Yeah, what I would add to that is that you can actually apply design principles to your policies and processes and business models and culture and various other aspects that all collectively comprise the customer experience or affect it. And borrowing ideas from other industries is, I think, part of what Yvonne was pointing to by having different types of people in the room. But when you're talking about customer experience, it's really important to think beyond the transactions that you have, the touch points, to the products and services, and then beyond that to the processes and policies, both external and internal, and culture and business models and everything. The whole ball of wax is what comprises the customer experience.
All right, Jim, you've been really quiet, so I've got a question for you. Let's go with this question here. A lot of people struggle with innovation and improvement. What do CX professionals need to know in order to experience high performance in these areas?
Well, first of all, I apologize. One of the reasons I've been quiet has been trying to get my webcam to kick in for whatever reason it has chosen to check out on me at this time. So I'll make a promise. I'll follow up and I'll actually do a video because I want to share something that I think every CX professional needs to know and a person that they need to know. And that is a guy by the name of George Land, Dr. George Land. Back in 1968, Dr. George Land was actually hired by NASA to do some studying on imaginative thinking because NASA, when we think of NASA, we think of big think tank. So it's, they needed to find more people at a much younger age to identify whether or not they have the ability to be very imaginative and creative thinkers so that they can innovate. It's all about innovation, and it can be applied in many different ways, and this is where that design thinking comes into play. You can do it in CX, you can do it in manufacturing, product design, marketing. I mean, it goes on and on, right? So his study was looking at, started out with looking at 4 to 5-year-olds and being able to test their ability to be imaginative, and 98% of 4 to 5-year-olds were considered on the genius scale. 98% of 4 to 5-year-olds. They studied them again at 10. It dropped down to 30%. They studied them again at the age of 15, and it was only 12%. People were adults, and they kept studying different folks at different ages, but an average age of 31 years old, it dropped to 2%. This is startling for many organizations that are trying to go through CX transformation. And what they found is that there's actually 2 types of thinking that are required in order to make change occur and to be creative and innovative, and that's both divergent and convergent thinking. And it's really a this then that. Unfortunately, through the school process and how we're taught to do it both at the same time. That does not work. What happens when we try to do that is we get the pushback of, well, we've never done it that way, or no, that's just crazy, there's no way we can do that. And so what you have to do is use tools in order to separate out the different types of thinking in order for you really to spark that change in imagination and creative process. And I'll make a tool available to everybody. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll send you the tool. I'll send you these visuals so you can use them in a presentation. One other thing that I'll leave you with is that in order to get people to think differently and try to separate them, you can say these words when you're talking to them and trying to get them to share with you different ways of doing things. And that is, help me understand. and you ask people those questions, and you really get their perspective, their thoughts, their ideas. So you put those 3 words in your vocabulary, they will pay you dividends as a CX professional.
Thanks, Jim. I'm going to totally appreciate my time with my 4-year-old tonight so much more. So much more. All right, so Lynn, I've got a question for you here. This one says, what is it meant by the term customers' jobs to be done, and how is it inspiration for CX innovation?
Well, customers' jobs to be done.
Oh, you're on mute.
I don't think I've touched the mute button. Can you hear me? Customers' jobs to be done are the things that customers are ultimately using your widget for. So if you're selling a service or you're selling a product, what are they trying to use it for? What are they actually combining it with? Whether it's social or hardware, other software, other processes, other people involved with the use of it. When you're focusing on the things that customers are doing with your stuff, you have a much broader idea of what your product is and what your product needs to be. So I'm using the phrase product very broadly, and also apply to process and policies and services, of course. But when you're focusing on the customer's ultimate intention with your things, whether they're in business to business or consumer or government or anything else, you have new avenues come to mind in terms of helping them get there. So rather than being focused on features and other traditional aspects of innovation, you're maybe even expanding your idea of who your competitors are. It's a bit of blue ocean thinking, as well as borrowing from the innovation industry that harkens back to about 1998. And so when Clayton Christensen wrote The Innovator's Dilemma and introduced the term of customers' jobs to be done, I think there's a lot of value to using it in customer experience management. It helps you focus on the expectations of customers, and if you inject that into your customer experience personas and other things, you have a whole new line of creativity that's available to you.
I think one of the paradigms that can help is pretend you're inventing a mobile app, because these days those are extraordinarily simple and amazing in terms of high utility, gets the job done. And a lot of times when you have more face-to-face services or more complex service processes, if you ask yourself that, it's one of those push the creativity type of questions. If this were a mobile app and you needed to get people to get their job done in 2 seconds flat, what would that entail? So it kind of forces that thinking. So to think about competing against some of those mobile apps that are coming out like 1,000 a day, they get picked up because they get the job done.
I think Yvonne brings up a really important point that we often overlook, and that is simplicity, ease. And that, we can create some very complex things if we apply thought to it, but we know that in the end, complex things don't work for anyone. They don't work for customers. They don't work for the organization. So it has to kind of be an overriding governance for whatever you do, and that is ease. Ease to deploy, ease to use, ease in order to be able to measure outcomes. All of the, ease to be able to adapt. Think about users, and ease is a really important word.
Too bad Staples got that easy button trademark, huh?
You got that right.
It's a good one.
All right, well, on that note, our easy button note, I wanted to thank our panel for today. It does not look like we have any more questions coming in from our live audience, but I just wanted to remind everyone viewing this that we do hold these Hangouts with our CX experts the last Wednesday of every month at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, and we definitely encourage and invite you to watch along with us. And you can always submit your questions using hashtag CX Hangout on Twitter. You can also add them to the comments section on our Google Plus Hangout, and we look forward to answering your questions here in the future. So again, thanks today to Yvonne, to Lynn, and to Jim for hanging out with us and having a great discussion on experience design, innovation, and improvement. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.